In this lesson, you will learn how to convert between percents, decimals, and fractions. So starting with percents and then converting to decimals, is I want to take 31% and write it as 31, and then the point would follow the 1. Always move your decimal point over 2 places when you're converting it to a decimal. And you want to move it over 2 places to the left, so that as a decimal, 31% is 0.31. For 60%, I would write this as 60, and if I don't see a decimal, it's always to the right of the last number, and I move it over 2 places to the left, so that I have 0.60, but since this number ends in a 0, we could also write this as 0.6. For 125%, we have 125 point, and we move it over 2 places to the left, which as a decimal will give us 1.25. Always move it over 2 places only. For 0.16%, 0.16 already has a decimal, but we still follow the rule of moving it over 2 places to the left, and when I do that, I have to add 2 zeros as placeholders, so 0.16% is 0.0016. So that's how you convert from percents to decimals. Now to convert to a fraction, I'm going to use the percent column here, and 31% is 31 over 100. I just take the number next to the percent and write it over 100. For 60%, it's 60 over 100. For 125%, it's 125 over 100. And for 0.16%, it's 0.16 over 100. So this is how we write the percent as a fraction, but the only problem that we have is that some of these are not reduced. 31 over 100, this is as far as we can go because 31 is a prime number. But for 60 out of 100, we can start by canceling the zeros so that we get 6 over 10. And then since both of these numbers are even, we can divide them both by 2, so that as a fraction in simplest form, it's 3/5. For 125 over 100, both of these numbers are divisible by 25. And this reduces to 5/4. You can always leave it as improper. You don't have to change it to a mixed number. And 5/4 is as far as we can go. For 0.16 over 100, the first thing I want to do is get rid of the decimal. So to get rid of the decimal, I have to move it over twice so that I have 16, but to balance this I have to add 2 zeros to the denominator. So I have 16 over 10,000. Now to reduce this one, this is a little more complicated. I'm going to come up to the top of the screen and I'm going to write the prime factorization of 16. And the prime factorization of 16 is 2 times 8, 2 times 4, and then 2 times 2. So I'm going to rewrite 16 as its prime factorization, which is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Now I'm going to take 10,000, and I'm going to start the prime factorization as 2 times 5,000, and then 2 times 2,500, and then 2 times 1,250, and then 2 times 625, and I could keep going with the 625, but since I have 4 2's, I'm actually going to stop here because each of the 2's in the denominator will cancel with all of the 2's in the numerator, so that I'm left with 1 over 625. If you kept going with the prime factorization of 625, you would just have to multiply them together again at the end, and you would end up with 625 anyway. So 31% is 0.31 as a decimal, 31 over 100 as a fraction. 60% is either 0.60 or 0.6 as a decimal, 3/5 as a fraction. 125% is 1.25 as a decimal and 5/4 as a fraction. 0.16% is 0.0016 as a decimal and 1 over 625 as a fraction. For the next group, we will look at converting decimals to percents and then to fractions. So first let's convert 0.13 to a percent. So I take 0.13, and to put the percent symbol on, you want to move over 2 places to the right, so that 0.13 is 13%. For 0.32, I take 0.32, move my decimal point over 2 places to the right, so that it's 32%. For 0.8, I move my decimal 2 places to the right, and I have to add a 0 as a placeholder to get 80%. And for 12, I don't have a decimal point shown. I know it's to the right of 2 when I don't see it there, so I move it over 2 places to the right, add 2 zeros as placeholders, and this gives me 1200%. For 0.012, I take my point, move it over 2 places to the right to get 1.2%. And then for 1.44, I take my decimal point 2 places to the right to get 144%. So my percent column is done. Now to convert to fractions, I will use my percent column, and if I take 13%, I just write that as 13 over 100. For 32%, 32 over 100. 80% is 80 over 100. 1200% is 1200 over 100. For 1.2%, it's 1.2 over 100. And for 144%, it's 144 over 100. So now that I have them written as over 100, now the hard part is that I have to reduce them. 13 over 100 does not reduce because 13 is prime. 32 over 100, both of these numbers are divisible by 4. So if I divide them both by 4, I get 8 over 25. And that's as far as I can go. For 80 over 100, I start by canceling the zeros to give me 8 out of 10. And then since both of these numbers are even, I divide them both by 2 to get 4 over 5. For 1200 over 100, both of the zeros cancel, so I'm left with just 12 over 1, and you can just write that as 12 would be okay. For 1.2 over 100, I want to move the decimal over to the right and add a 0. You never want decimals when you're reducing fractions. So I have 12 over 1,000. So with both of these numbers being even, I can start by dividing them both by 2. So when I divide both 12 and 1,000 by 2, I get 6 over 500, but then they're both even again, so I can divide them by another 2 to get 3 over 250, and that's as far as I can go. For 144 over 100, I'm going to start by dividing them both by 4. A number is divisible by 4 if the last 2 digits of that number are divisible by 4. So if I take 144 by 4, I get 36. 100 divided by 4 is 25. Or you could have divided by 2 twice. Either way, the final fraction is 36 over 25. So 1.44 is 36 over 25 as a fraction, and 144%. And for 0.012, we have 1.2%, and 3 out of 250. For 12, it's just 12 as a fraction, and then 1200%. For 0.8 was 80%, and then 4/5. For 0.32, we had 8 over 25, and 32%. And for 0.13, it was 13%, and 13 out of 100. And for the last group, we're given the fraction, and we want to write this as a percent and then a decimal. So to write this as a percent, I set this equal to x over 100. And I cross multiply to get 100x equals 1700. And when I divide both sides by 100, I get x is equal to 17. So as a percent, 17 out of 100 is 17%. So if you can just look at this and see that it has to be 17% because it's already out of 100, that's fine. I showed you the long way because this is how I'll do the remaining problems. 18 over 25, I set it equal to x over 100. I cross multiply to get 25x, and then 18 times 100 is 1800. I divide both sides by 25, and I get x is equal to 72. So as a percent, 18 over 25 is 72%. For 9 over 5, I set this equal to x over 100. I cross multiply. 5x equals 900. I divide both sides by 5, and I get x is equal to 180. So as a percent, 9/5 is 180%. The other way you could do this is you could also use long division. That would be another option. And for the last example, we set 1 over 200 equal to x over 100, cross multiply, 200x equals 100, and when I divide by 200, I get x is equal to 100 over 200. The zeros cancel. I'm left with 1/2, and 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So 1 over 200 is 0.5%. And you could write this as a 0.5% too. I'll leave it as 0.5%. And now that I have my percentages, I want to take my numbers of 17, take the decimal, move it over 2 places to the left, so my decimal answer is 0.17. For 72%, it's 72 point, move it over 2 places to the left to get 0.72. For 180%, I move my decimal 2 places to the left to get 1.80, or since it ends in a 0, just 1.8 would be fine too. And for 0.5%, I want to take my decimal, move it over 2 places to the left, so I need 2 zeros as placeholders to get 0.005.